Okay, so a while back I was thinking to myself, why do I have a GameCube, a Wii, and a Wii U? Why do I have a GBA, a DS Lite, a DSi, and a 3DS? Do I really need 3 different consoles that can play Blinks? Really? There's way too much overlap here. And good God, these things are starting to take up a lot of space. I wonder if I can trim some fat here. So, I figured I'd take some time to construct a list that does just that, and make it a video. Why not, right? So, this video will show and explain what game consoles you should get to maximize excess hardware. Wait, what? To minimize excess hardware and maximize software and feature coverage. But before we begin, a word from our sponsor. CrossTalk. We're gonna need some guidelines out here to try and clear up any confusion that might arise in the comments. So, I've made 5 rules that I'll generally be following while making my recommendations, and they are as follows. Rule 1.
Quality is king.
The point of this video is to help you save your shelf space and your money, not by recommending the cheapest hardware per se, but by mapping out the most optimal coverage of games and features across the fewest game boxes necessary, with minimal trade-offs to the overall experience as possible. Rule 2.
Hardware mods are hard.
Any recommendations made in this video are made with the assumption that no internal modifications have been or planned to be done to the consoles. I mean, if we talked about all that, I'd be here all day. Surface level tampering with the system is fine, but I'm not going to go into anything that requires actually disassembling the case. Like, that's just going way too far for the average small brain. No one with the jobs trying to take time out of their day that could be spent like enjoying a good game, actually enjoying the game, on RGB HDMI modding their Game Boy to do 3D RTX 8K OLED HDR AI super sampling at 144,000 frames per second. Like, dude, just want to play the game. Rule 3.
Action replay is sick.
Unofficial software made to expand a console's functionality is fair game, so I'm going to be taking them into account when recommending consoles. The only caveat to this is I'm not going to be bringing them up if they're hard to find or they're not commercially available. That last bit where I acted like I cared about the availability of whatever unofficial software does not apply to consoles, okay? If the console variant I tell you to get is hard to find, well, that's tough, bro. That's the one I'm recommending. Rule 4.
Don't bully me. I'm decrepit and frail.
I'm the only one who did any research for this video, so if I get anything wrong, I apologize, I guess. I don't know. I did my best. I haven't owned most of the consoles in this video, so I just looked around for the information I would need in order to decide on which ones I would get if I had to get them right now. I probably don't need to say this, but if there's something I missed, please correct me in the comments. After all, it helps with engagement. And now for the last and most important 5th rule.
I don't got all day.
I'll only be talking about major consoles that were released by companies that made more than just one console. What I mean by this is that no, I will not be talking about the Zebo, okay? The only exception to this rule is Panasonic, and I'll get to that later on in the video. Now let's get right into it. First brand, and my personal favorite, Sega. I just want to say, before I get into which consoles you should get, I didn't even know about Sega's 8-bit consoles outside the Master System. I didn't realize how difficult it was going to be to research the video until I got to Sega, and at that point, I was already deep into the script. And as much as I hate to admit it, yeah, the order in which I'm presenting all this stuff to you is not the same order in which I accumulated it. Had I known what I was getting myself into before starting, frankly, I probably would have made a different video. Because my god, the documentation of the whole SG series of consoles from Sega, it's like a slushy, crusty, glucky, blucky mess. It's nearly impossible to find specific information on them, and it's kind of a shame too, because a lot of these games actually look really fun. It's pretty confusing too, like the naming scheme, for instance. It's truly awful. To the untrained eye, the SG-1000 and SC-3000 sound like they should be light years apart in computational power. Right? 2 entire 1,000 additional dubious units of computational power, in fact. But no, these were created alongside each other, with the only real differences between them being sound hardware and, well, intent. Allow me to explain. The SG in SG-1000 stands for Sega Game, vaguely. So you should be able to guess at this point that the C in SC-3000 stands for computer. So, just to clarify, the SC-3000 is just an SG-1000 masquerading as a PC. This also means that the SG-1000's successor, the SG-1002, is actually more capable than the SC-3000 despite having a smaller number in its name. And now that I think about it, this means that the devilishly deceiving SC-3000 has successfully pulled one over on me. Because despite me making a video about dedicated video game consoles, I've already said the name SC-3000 exactly 6 times in the video at this point. And before the video ends, I'm probably going to end up saying it about, oh, I don't know, 9 more times. There's also an officially Sega licensed version of the 1000 called the Othello Multivision, released by Sakuda Original, a toy company that is now dead. Like Zebo. I'm getting off track here. To deduce what consoles we should buy to maximize software support and features while minimizing how many eBay auctions we need to participate in, we're going to be looking at all the available hardware and weighing our options. So right off the bat, we can disregard the original SG-1000, since the sequel is just better in every meaningful way. The controllers alone make this a no-brainer. But I haven't brought up the backwards compatible Master System hardware yet. And comparing these two options is a little bit harder. At first glance, you'd think the Master System would be the obvious choice between the two consoles, but you'd be thinking totally wrong. Yeah, the Master System can run Master System and SG titles, but it falls short when you realize that it doesn't support the MyCard format. Which many games were released on. Or the usage of pretty much all the early 8-bit Sega accessories. Such add-ons included the FM sound expansion board, which was additional hardware that plugged into the back of the device, only worked with the SG-1000 too, and allowed a sizable number of games to make use of new sound for better music. There's the Sega Keyboard 1100, a rubber membrane keyboard add-on for the SG line that looks like a goddamn nightmare to actually use. But I mean, nonetheless, it could be used to write software in BASIC and play SC-3000 games that use it. It could also do other things that you would otherwise only be able to do on the SC-3000, like, for instance, attaching the SC-3000's very own 4-color printer, which can be daisy-chained through the keyboard for usage on the SG-1000 hardware. Oh, the name of the printer, you ask?
Sega Printer 400, baby.
Oh, and how could I forget? The Sega Super Control Station SF7000, a device designed for use only with the SC-3000 that adds an additional 64 kilobytes of RAM, 8 kilobytes of ROM, a drive for the obscure 3-inch floppy disk format, a random Centronics parallel port, and an RS-232 serial port. Frankly, looks like you should be able to use it with any of the Japanese 8-bit Sega consoles, but you can't because it and the keyboard conflict with each other on the memory bus of the console is plugged into, so it only works on the SC3000. All that said, the Master System,
Sucks.
So that's it? I hear you ask. Do we have to buy both an SG-1002 and a Master System in order to get the most out of the 8-bit Sega experience? No, you don't have to do that. I've actually been purposefully withholding pertinent information for the past, 3 paragraphs of this script in order to artificially create tension. I've made it seem like there's a problem here, when in reality, there's no problems at all. The solution we're looking for is dead simple and all-encompassing. This, my friends, is the Zebo. This is the Sega Mark III, the ultimate 8-bit Sega machine. It has everything. It can play SG-1000 games, Sega Mark III games, Sega My Card EP games, a format which, like the SC3000 cassettes, I haven't even mentioned in this video yet. It can play American Sega Master System games with the help of an adapter, because I guess those cartridges have a completely different shape to them. The adapter is readily available online, though it's super easy to find, but yeah, you'd need one of those. The FM audio add-on is built into the console, and you can even play SC3000 games on it. That's right, you heard me. The Mark III even supports the
Sega Keyboard 1100, baby.
And the
Sega Printer 400, baby.
But what if I cannot get a Mark III and I can only get the SG-1000 too? I hear you woefully ponder. Well, worry not. I have a solution. You need to locate a Japanese first model Sega Mega Drive and the Mega Adapter, alongside the aforementioned Master System to Mark III adapter, to allow the Mega Adapter to play Master System games. The reason you need a Japanese Mega Drive is because the only SMS adapter I could find available online was Master System to Mark III specifically, and not the other way around, thus requiring a Japanese power base converter, which won't work with an NTSC Genesis, therefore requiring a Japanese console. Makes sense? This is nearly an equally valid solution though, because even though a few Master System or Mark III games don't work when used on a power base converter, the majority do, and let's face it, you were gonna get a Genesis anyway. Might even be cheaper than getting a Mark III. All you're really comparing here is the price of a Mark III to the price of a Mega Adapter and an SMS adapter. And if you get the absurd Sega CD and 32X add-ons, you'll have a hunk of plastic that'll allow you to play pretty much every Genesis and Master System game with very little compromise to the overall audiovisual experience. If you do get a Mark III though, for 16-bit games, just get any Model 1 Genesis and all the goofy add-ons that you'd need to get anyway. There's countless different methods for playing games from other regions on the Genesis, so I'll leave that part up to you. And that's it for Sega. Yeah, seriously. Because unless you're a die-hard Sega fan or something, I don't really think there's much of a reason to go beyond these two consoles. A lot of the games that were worth playing on the Saturn and Dreamcast have been ported to other platforms already, and the only thing you'd really be missing out on by skipping them would be experiencing the peripherals like the Dreamcast's VMUs, and maybe a small handful of unique experimental games. So, yeah, let's move on to the next lineup. SNK. Hey, so funny little thing here. I wrote a whole script for this part of the video. I was gonna recommend the AES, but honestly, there's no reason to get anything from SNK. All their games are available on the Switch, PS4, whatever the heck. Like, you can get these games just about anywhere. So we're gonna skip it. We're gonna go right into the next category. That's right, NEC. Unless you're an assless chaps wearing hot-blooded American cowboy or a Bonk fan, you're not getting a TurboGrafx 16. If you're trying to get an NEC console, it's assumed at this point that you're an unpatriotic weeaboo. You're getting a PC engine. I'm not gonna lie. This is pretty complicated, so if you don't actually have any particular games that you want to play on the PC engine, but you're still open to the idea of playing PC Engine games in general, allow me to spare you the countless hours you'll be spending weighing your options. Yes, instead of pondering for days about what you should be looking for, I present you this.
The list of what to get, and then what to get if the first thing I said is available nowhere online.
If you can, just get the PC Engine Duo RX. If you can't, then get the Duo R. If you can't, then get the Duo. If you can't, then get the PC Engine SuperGrafx with a CD add-on. If none of those are available, then get the PC Engine Core Graphics or PC Engine Core Graphics 2, again with the CD add-on. Now stop. You'll hurt yourself if you think too much about all the other hardware choices out there. And if you aren't careful, you might end up accidentally getting a Z. There's just such an overwhelming amount of different ways to play PC Engine games, and there's too many different software formats. For starters, there's the default HuCard format, which most people are familiar with. It's what everyone thinks of when they think of the TurboGrafx 16. But don't worry, it actually gets deeper. Just one step further into hell after the HuCards, we got the CD-ROM 2. Superscript. And let me pause this for a second, because what were they thinking? Apparently, this is supposed to be pronounced as CD-ROM-ROM. NEC. Why? Whatever, cool. That's fine, okay. No big deal. It's just a disc add-on with a dumb name. Nothing we've never seen before. But then there's the SuperGrafx cards, designed solely for SuperGrafx compatible PC Engine hardware. And then there's the Super CD-ROM-ROM, which is designed only for use on the Super CD-ROM-ROM system or a normal CD-ROM-ROM system with the delicious Super System add-on. Pretty goddamn confusing, yeah. But after all that, we still have the arcade CD-ROM-ROM, which was made for the Super CD-ROM-ROM system with the arcade card Duo inserted, or the normal CD-ROM-ROM system with the arcade card Pro inserted. Oh my lord. But don't get too comfy. Yeah, that's all the software formats, but that's only half the battle. In case you've forgotten, the only hardware variants I've mentioned so far are the ones that were made to accommodate the different software formats I've already mentioned thus far. By God, there is more. There are variants of this console that exist in strange and unique form factors. Like, for example, the Pioneer Laser Active, which, along with running PC Engine HuCards and Super CD-ROM-ROM discs, also plays Laserdisc media, as well as Sega Genesis games, including Sega CD titles. There's also the 1987 Sharp X1 Twin, a personal computer, which also had a HuCard slot. Oh, and we can't forget the NEC PC FXGA DOS/V
Game Accelerator.
A card that can be plugged directly into the motherboard of your actual PC that just is a whole ass PC engine. Wait, no. What was I thinking when I wrote this? How did I mess this up? I'm sorely mistaken. This is not a PC Engine. This is a PCFX. Speaking of which, PCFX released only 20 days before Sony's PlayStation, and exactly 1 month and 1 day after the Sega Saturn was shot out onto store shelves. It was NEC's final gambit in the console market, a 32-bit tower that looked like an actual PC, and was intended to be similarly upgradable, but nonetheless was still a dedicated video game console. It didn't possess any hardware for processing and rendering 3D graphics, a move that anyone would agree was a pretty bad business choice. 3D was the way of the future. Why would they make such an embarrassing decision? Moreover, it actually did have support for full motion video, something that many nowadays would agree was more of a gimmick at the time and would ultimately be less than necessary in hindsight. So again, why? Was 3D even that big of a risk? Well, the harmonious tone of this sequence of hilariously bad choices rings differently when you think about it like this. Although this sounds like an awful idea in hindsight, choosing FMV over 3D, at the time, 3D games and FMV games both seemed like they had potential, while also coming off in some areas as just gimmicks. Simply moving forward with the idea of choosing one alone was already a major risk, but then actually choosing only one of the two, well, that's a risk within a risk. The PCFX came out exactly 1 year and 6 months before the N64, and that's only in Japan. The PCFX came out 1 year, 9 months, and 6 days before the North American release of the N64. That's exactly 55,814,400 seconds. I don't blame them at all for not going full send on 3D graphics. If cutting-edge pre-rendered 3D art at the time looked like this, I'd be questioning the medium as well. Anyway, I think this thing's pretty cool, but only worth it if you like NEC more than life itself. There were only 60 games released for it, and though I haven't taken a granular look at the library myself, I've noticed that a lot of the games on it were born and then later died on the system. What a wild ride. So how's about we take a little break? We'll be right back with something a bit simpler after these messages.
Forgot what I was gonna say.
Welcome to the next level.
Internet sem computador, sem assinatura.
Okay, enough. That's enough. We gotta get past this next one, and we gotta get past it
Fast.
Alright, let's get into it. Panasonic. Look, I didn't want to do this one, but I just felt like I needed to, okay? It's an easy one, so I'll touch on it real quick. Do I recommend the 3DO interactive multiplayer, you ask? Well, in the making of this video, I chose to exclude consoles that do not have enough exclusive software to warrant purchasing them. Yet, here I am, funnily enough, including the 3DO in this video, while excluding Neo Geo. Why is that? I feel like I need to defend myself and explain why I'm talking about this console at all before I continue. The 3DO, simply put, is culturally significant. I have no clue why, but it seems, under no real metric, to me, that people on the internet over the years have talked more about this console than the ColecoVision, the 8-bit Sega consoles, or even the Z. It's seemingly a really big deal for no discernible reason, but it's a big deal nonetheless. And that significance is massively disproportionately higher than its value as a gaming device. Basically, I found it really hard for me to include it in this video, but it was also kinda hard to not include it, since it does have exclusives that are worth playing, and there are a truckload of different console variants to research and compare. It was during my first few minutes of researching these consoles that I discovered something. The main reason I'm bringing up the 3DO in this video is to tell anyone who even has a passing interest in it to be very careful.
Will somebody please call the maid?
There's like 9 hardware variants, and there's major issues with all of them. Some are prone to disk reading errors, and that's only the least of the issues. Some overheat, some degrade over time, some feel cheap and fragile, some are insanely rare and expensive, some are just plain ugly, and a good chunk of them absolutely love shredding discs. This is all on top of the usual pitfalls of buying pre-owned, potentially faulty video game consoles, and the risk of losing money that comes with console collecting in general. I felt it necessary to tell you what I think your best choices are for the sake of ensuring that if you waste your money, you do it properly. I've narrowed 9 down to only 2. If what you seek is reliability, then try to get the FZ TAC 10. It's pretty cheap feeling, but generally seems to have the least amount of reported issues, with many citing that its lack of a motorized disc tray as reason enough to get one over any of the other options. This is because the tray eject mechanisms in these consoles seemingly always fail. I'd also like to mention that despite how cheap this console might seem, it ain't. It was one of the last 3DOs designed before the platform was violently discontinued, so not all that many ever really got made. Your other choice is the FZ TAC 1, the first one. It's the nicest looking, but still exhibits a good amount of that classic 3DO jank. Honestly, this is the one that I'd personally buy if I was going to get one. It may be way less reliable, but if we're being real here, you're not gonna play more than 1 or 2 games on it anyway. You just want the one that looks the nicest on your entertainment shelf. So let's just move on to, oh yeah, Sony. This one is kinda strange. Sony seems to be extremely wishy-washy when it comes to backwards compatibility, and if you want to maximize the amount of games you can play, in the PlayStation lineup at least, with the least amount of hardware, well, this is what you'll need. First off, the Vita. Hear me out, okay? Even if we ignore the modifications that can be done to make the Vita a robust multimedia and emulation platform, this thing still stands tall as a worthwhile purchase. Its library is filled with great games, but is made even more impressive with the long line of additional software that carried over from the PSP and even the PS1. And so, with that said, unless you really like many of the incompatible PSP games out there, or similarly unsupported PS1 games, you should be able to experience what the best of those two have to offer on the Vita. If the PSP or PS1 games that you love most are unavailable on the Vita, don't let me stop you from buying whatever consoles you want. It just seems to me that the Vita has the heaviest hitters from the two platforms. Now, which Vita should you get? Well, there's 2 options, and you can't go wrong with either of them. The 1000 model uses an OLED screen, which is debatably nicer looking than the LCD on the 2000. But the 2000 comes with a gigabyte of onboard storage, as opposed to the 1000's 0. It should be stated though that the 2000 is a bit lighter and cheaper feeling, but uses micro USB for charging instead of the proprietary charging cables that the 1000 uses, which are notoriously low quality. If you're still undecided at this point between the 1000 and 2000, then you should get the 2000 because it has a bigger battery. So yeah, skip the PSP and PS1 unless you really don't want to, and get the Vita. Next up is the PS5, seeing that it's backwards compatible with the PS4, including PSVR and downloaded titles. You don't need a PS4, though that's where the support ends. If you want to play any games older than the PS4, you'll need one more console. A 60GB first-gen PS3, model CECHA, followed by 2 other characters. This particular model of PS3 is important because on top of being able to play PS1 games, it's one of the few that possess backwards compatibility with the PS2, and of those, one of the very few with hardware-based backwards compatibility with the PS2 instead of pure emulation. It's kind of strange how this just happened though. Like, there's such a drastic difference between all these PS3 console variations. Like, I get it, the NEC and early Sega hardware were scared and confused, but those were released back when the games industry was still more of a Wild West. But the PS3? I'm digressing. I've said all that I need to say here, so let's move on. Let's talk about Atari. Before making this list, I had little to no knowledge about the compatibility between all the different hardware in the line of 8-bit consoles released by Atari. In fact, I had little to no knowledge about Atari consoles in general. I was always under the impression that they never really had any good games. But, since my research had begun, I've started to learn that in actuality, I was right. There are indeed very few really fun Atari games, but there's still a handful that are worth playing, and if you want to play them, you may be surprised to hear that all you'll need is, you guessed it, a Zeebo. No, for real though. For some reason, no joke, the only thing you'll need to play Atari games is a ColecoVision. Yeah, seriously. Dude, can you even imagine? Like, think about being able to play Xbox games on your PlayStation. That's what this is. This thing is wild. Anyway, for the sake of specificity, I should tell you that you'll need expansion module number 1.
Very creative, Coleco. Very nice.
And not just a ColecoVision. Can you even imagine how long it took me to deduce that the logical
Best way to play 8-bit Atari games
is to buy a ColecoVision? I'd like to say it was easy, but it wasn't. Apparently everyone knew this already, and I'm just now realizing that this is the case. Yeah. This thing plays Atari 2600 games alongside ColecoVision games, and it even supports the same controllers that the Atari could, so you're not forced to use these. If you're a big enough fan of Atari to want more beyond their 2600 games, and, well, I guess any of the Coleco games too, now that you have a ColecoVision, you might want to get a Lynx. That's the only one that I would say might be worth getting, but I'm not recommending it. But if you do get a Lynx, there are 2 versions. The second one is the good one. Any other Atari consoles are definitely not worth getting unless you really consider yourself particularly interested in playing games on the Atari platforms. The 7800 is cool, but like 60% of the games are just worse versions of stuff you can get on other platforms. The Jaguar is dumb, but if you get it, just don't forget the CD add-on. The 5200 is gutter trash. The Atari 800 is a PC. I feel nauseous just saying its name in this video. And that's all I have to say about that. Atari is lame. Let's stop beating around the bush. I've put it off all video. Let's just get it over with. Here we go. It's Nintendo. Alright, here's the thing. I'm not sure how or why this is the case, but for some reason, a lot of people, me included, have believed that Nintendo consoles have always had great backwards compatibility. It really perplexes me because they really don't. Let me lay this all out right here, right now. For Sony, you'll need at least 3 consoles to play most of all the games they support. For Sega, you need 2. For Zeebo, you only need 1. But for Nintendo, to play the most amount of supported titles with as little hardware as possible, you'll need not 3, not 4, not 5, but 7 consoles. Anyway, if you want to access the majority of Nintendo's vast library, you'll need to start with the top-loader HVC 101 Famicom. With this console, a 72 to 60 pin adapter, and the Disk System add-on, you'll be able to play pretty much every single NES game out there, region-free. For Super Nintendo games, you can just grab your gray box from the attic and tear off the 2 tabs inside the cartridge slot. These little plastic goblins are literally the only thing preventing you from being able to play Japanese games on your NTSC console. The N64, on the other hand, is a bit harder, but is still nearly exactly the same as the SNES. There's some plastic tabs that need to be removed again, but this time I'd actually recommend getting a Japanese model, solely because the tabs are easier to access. If you can't get a Japanese one, you'll be fine with an NTSC model, but the tabs are going to be really hard to get out. Once you manage to get them out though, you'll be able to play any N64 game on it, and this includes the 64DD. Finally, we can skip a console. Since the Wii plays GameCube games, you don't need to worry about it. Just make sure you have a Wii with GameCube controller ports up top, and make sure to get Freeloader if you want to play games from other regions. As for WiiWare titles, most have a form of DRM that just won't allow transfer to your Wii. So without straight letter bombing it, you're out of luck there. But since at this point we already have the previous consoles, we won't really be losing anything from not having any virtual console access. Of course, there are still some really great WiiWare titles that are being missed by not just hacking your Wii, but there's not really enough to lose sleep over, so, I mean, if you do find yourself losing sleep because you can't play
Sandy Beach
anymore, then just hack your Wii, god dang it. Just know that this video was made under the assumption that you wouldn't be messing with homebrew, hard modding, and hacking. If you were, you'd probably be able to narrow this whole list down to like 2 or 3 consoles. Let's move to the next one. The Wii U is not necessary, forget it ever existed. Now the Switch, on the other hand, is worth getting. Preferably the OLED model. A lot of the best-selling Wii U games got ported to it, the library is massive, and I gotta admit, the fact that it's also a handheld is super cool. I don't have much more to say about it, just don't get the Lite if you want maximum compatibility, and you're all set. And that brings us into the other half of Nintendo. Handhelds. Oh, okay, I see. So this is where Nintendo got their track record for backwards compatibility. Alright, I see now. Okay, the GBA SP can play GBA games, Game Boy Color games, and normal Game Boy games. Plus, it has a convenient clamshell design and a backlight. But if you'd prefer to trade those last two things for a more ergonomic form factor, a headphone jack, and better controls in Kirby Tilt and Tumble, then the normal GBA will do just fine. And with that, we can skip the entire DS lineup and move on to the 3DS. Specifically, the new 3DS XL. The new 3DS and XL are capable of playing all 3DS games and DS games, with the exception of the one or two instances where a DS game required the use of a GBA slot on the bottom. It also has the added benefit of loading games somewhat faster, a significantly improved 3D feature, the addition of a C-stick for using select titles, and a few notable exclusives, like Xenoblade Chronicles 3D. It's extremely impressive that you can experience nearly every single handheld game from Nintendo with only 2 consoles. It sucks that the same can't be said for their home console lineup, but what can you do? And speaking of home consoles, we have one more brand to go over. That's right, one more, our last brand. Oh, and by the way, if you have a collection you want to share, be it consoles, games, merch, or what have you, tweet me pictures of your stuff. I'd legitimately love to see your Bad Dragon collection. Now, on to the next lineup. Microsoft. Alright, unless you want to play old, currently unsupported multiplats that looked best on the original Xbox, or Jet Set Radio Future, the Series X or S is all you'll really need to enjoy most of everything Xbox has ever offered before. And that is kinda crazy. Like, dude, just look at this list of supported games. It's massive. It's basically the entire library. It really has me wondering why there was such a negative outcry about this when it came out. So many people were claiming there's no reason to buy it, but I couldn't disagree more. I mean, if I don't want a million game consoles sitting under my TV, I can't think of a deal better than this console right here. And without further ado, our final console is Zeebo. Alright, it's time for the lightning round. Before I give my closing thoughts, these are all the consoles I recommend. For Sega, you'll need a Japanese Mega Drive with a Mega adapter and an SMS adapter, or a Mark III with an SMS adapter, and any Genesis with the 32X and CD add-ons. For SNK, I don't recommend anything, really, but I'm not against the AES, Pocket Color, or CDZ. Next up is NEC, where there's lots of equally good options because, well, it doesn't really matter which one you get. Any PC engine can be upgraded in one way or another to match the capabilities of any other PC Engine console. So my recommendations are as follows. PC Engine Duo RX, Duo R, Duo, Super Graphics with either CD add-on, the Super being preferred, but you can use the Super CD card with a normal CD instead. Core Graphics or Core Graphics 2, again with the CD add-on, and that's it. For Sony, you'll need a PS3 model CECHA, followed by 2 other characters, a Vita, and a PS5. For Atari, you'll need an Intellivision 2. For Nintendo, hold on to your hats here, you're gonna need an HVC 101 Famicom with a 72 to 60 pin adapter and the Disk System add-on. After that, you'll only need an SNES, a Japanese N64 with the 64DD, a Wii, specifically one that has GameCube controller ports, a Switch OLED, the Game Boy Advance or Game Boy Advance SP. The SP is probably preferred, but there are reasons to prefer the GBA over it, and the new 3DS XL. Moving on, we have Microsoft, where all you'll need is the Xbox Series X. If there are any consoles that weren't mentioned in this video that you think definitely are still worth getting, they were probably not mentioned at all because there is no software overlap between it and future iterations of it. And now, on to my closing thoughts. The consoles selected in this video were chosen as they appear on paper with the rules stated at the beginning of the video in a vacuum. The point here is to allow classic game collectors to play the officially released games they collect with minimal consoles. The console choices made in this video do not take into account the many potential variables that come with attempting to get clear signals from them, the usage of flash cards or mod support, and as such are not swayed by these factors. I've leaned towards a preference for minimizing overlap in software support versus trying to support every game in a given console's library. This is likely an unsatisfactory choice for many, but to prioritize support for every game would force obtuse amounts of overlapping support for many more. I think it should still be up to the individual beyond what I state in this video to decide where to accept overlap and support across consoles and decide for themselves. When it comes to software, exclusive games are valued more, but if there's another version of a console that only supports about 90% of the games in its library, yet provided more features like higher resolutions, better sound, better controllers, or what have you, then I'd pick the one with more features since it provides a more complete experience to the games that are still playable on it. If there's two completely identical consoles that don't share a price or rarity, then the cheaper one is the clear choice. If there's a console version that does nothing more than offer support for a very small few other games on top of the existing library for that console and is otherwise functionally identical to its predecessors, it shall still be chosen despite the increased price. Price is only a concern when there's no other differing traits to compare. Add-ons that serve only to add functionality to a console should always be purchased unless they are required to be unplugged and stored elsewhere in order to play most games on the console. At that point, it's up to you if you want to get the add-on or instead opt for other dedicated hardware that natively possesses what the add-on is supposed to provide. This video takes notice of the fact that not all games are made equal. Someone with nothing more than the consoles I suggested in this video should be able to experience all of the best from any corner of the console gaming industry. Any common game recommendation they get should be supported by at least one of the consoles recommended. And there you go. Alright, finally! The video's done! I can finally return to normalcy. If I messed something up, leave it in the comments. My name is SAUZ, this has been CrossTalk. Follow me on Twitter, follow me on Twitch, sub to my channel, and most of all, give me your money.